it's an amazing process. It's an extraordinary process. And when one directly begins to experience that, and when one relaxes into that, and when the fear is being addressed, faced, and reconciled with trust and acceptance and surrender, welcoming, then one essentially begins to be initiated into these very profound processes, to very profound side of existence. This transformation is what it is. This alchemy of transformation is inseparable from these processes. Therefore, spirituality, when people begin to argue, whether this path requires it, because it's part of that path, right? And that part is not required. That path is not requiring this. Then, again, understanding is needed here. Understanding of what is the actual process consists of. What is actually happening. And then all the questions are being rendered asunder. They simply put to rest. And it is your duty of all of you to answer these questions for yourself, to reconcile them. Because one of the most pertinent dilemmas on a spiritual path is, even in those, and sometimes more so in those in whom this awakening already takes place, and if there's not enough understanding, then one enters into this loop. One enters this phase, a period where, because of that lack of proper understanding, there's no possibility, or the possibility of greater unfoldment, greater expansion is impeded. Because that in itself is in the nature of consciousness. You see? It's extremely subtle. Whilst at the same time, once there is a proper understanding, then tremendous amount of energy is released to do its work. Because if there is not enough understanding, there will be more possibility for fear, for doubts, more hesitations, and back and forth. And, like now, taking it a little further, how relevant it is to this particular group. It's certainly relevant to the 50% of this group to begin with, because many people here already experiencing this and giving themselves to this work, or assuming that they're giving themselves to this work, is that in the process of transformation, there is a battle begins, a certain confrontation, when we begin to be confronted with that, what essentially is simply a repository of previous experiences. It's simply an idea, a notion of ourselves that we have accumulated over time. A notion. In fact, if we go somewhere, try to find out where it is actually accumulated, we will have a very hard time. Because it's not like, oh, it's there, oh, it's here, it's locked here, it's there. No, it's simply in the field, in our energetic field. We carry these ideas and ideations about ourselves. And the battle here is, of course, is because we live still in a world, we live in a secular world, awakening in a culture where it is the highest incentive of the culture, is the greatest thing ever can happen. But awakening in a culture where it is a weird thing to do will be viewed as a weird thing to do. So therefore, there were times the awakened were simply burned, or drowned, or talked to, or locked into, or laughed at, or sedated, and the list goes on. It's still on, going on. I can turn this whole thing around and say that the culture that we live in is a sedated culture. We live in the culture which is not actually a culture. The fact that we all wear smart clothes, smartphones, and do a lot of smart things does not actually indicate that it's a smart culture. We think that we outsmart something or someone along the way, but it's far from the case. It's an interesting thing. And that's one of the first things a true awakened being experiences, is breaking away from the matrix. It's like literally, it's like having that pill and suddenly, wow. And that phase is not always the same with everyone. In my experience, it's another field that I want to share with you, some field of direct experiences of working with people. It's not that it's granted that one's awakening will bring one a prolonged phase when one will be broken away. It can last hours, few days, more rarely, few weeks, in more rare cases, few months, in even more rare cases, maybe up to a year or longer, when one will completely be broken free from it all. One has a glimpse, enough to know that one is more than one has ever considered to be. But that is not enough in itself to break free, because then it will be a memory. One will, of course, be eager and longing to re-experience or longing to actualize that, longing to integrate that. But not being in that phase when one is completely free of the matrix. One will be doing that, being back into the matrix. You see? And being back in the matrix, one would have to, like, literally having to hover above that what otherwise known as collective layer of consciousness. Because predominantly the collective consciousness is it's that smartphone and smart things, and all that makes us feel and think of ourselves as being these very smart things. And very, very, very narrow segment of actual, a sliver of what this life is being experienced.